Welcome to Women Like Us. My name is Nancy John. I am your host and facilitator for today's conversation. As the co-founder and CEO of Seed Leadership, a coaching and consultancy firm whose focus is all about building future leaders, I'm especially excited to be part of this forum. Women Like Us is for all of you up-and-coming female leaders who may be looking around the room, looking around your leadership tables and wondering, where are all the women like me? So if you're looking to learn from the wins, the losses, and the experiences of other successful women, then you've come to the right place. Our discussion today is about navigating getting a promotion. So stay tuned, and we're going to get right into the conversation. Well, welcome to this conversation on navigating getting a promotion. Before we jump right into the conversation, I want to take a moment to introduce the ladies who are around the table. We have Esther, Sarah, and Lisa joining this conversation. They're all women leaders across major industries and really equipped to have this conversation that we're having today. So just to kick us off, Esther, we'll have everyone introduce themselves, but Esther, perhaps you can start and share a bit about yourself.
Sure. Been in the high-tech industry now for around 25 years, so a lot, having gone through both a technical role and sales leadership role, but it's really interesting being able to collaborate with the extended team here. I've known every one of you in different paths and journeys and wanted to really have a forum to collaborate and share thoughts, leadership, skills, hints and tips, and be able to provide that ability to give back to those behind us. And so we're hoping that the audience that's out there will get as much from these series as we do learning off each other.
Well, Sarah, why don't you go next?
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah. I am a 16-year sales veteran in high tech. I also have an MBA with the University of Toronto. And like Esther, just happy to share, learn, and give back to those interested in really navigating your career in corporate world.
And Lisa.
Hi, my name is Lisa. I'm a mom. I've been working in multiple industries, including tech and financial services, for the better part of 20 years. I myself have just changed careers and trying to navigate the corporate world. And I hope that our experiences here will help to continue for us to grow as individuals, as a group, but also for lots of other individuals that they can see their representation here and take the bits and pieces of what we talk about to help them in their journey.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, ladies. I feel we do have a wealth of knowledge and experience sitting around this virtual table. So I mentioned that our conversation today is about navigating getting a promotion. And I wanted to just do like a little bit of a research to figure out what does that look like on a Canadian context. So I went and looked up, and there's just a couple of studies. So one study that was done in 2017, I think it's still relevant. It found that even though 82% of women between the ages of 25 to 54 are currently in the Canadian workforce, the study was able to uncover that the representation on the leadership level doesn't really follow through with that. And so it showed that women hold 25% of VP positions and 15% of CEO positions. And another study that was done with the top 500 companies in Canada, and they found that of those 500, there was 109 of them that didn't have any women on their board of directors. And those things just help us to see the gap that exists. So I was curious to just find out from all of you, as you hear those numbers, like what actually, like how does that sit with you? What comes up for you as you hear that?
I think all of us are somewhat, and it might be a good or bad thing, we're somewhat immune to the stats because nothing surprises us anymore. And I know Lisa and Sarah have shared some of our concerns as well as aspirations and optimizations for what could change. And having a glass half full and half empty perspective is always kind of the norm. I want the ladies who are behind us, and the reason for Women Like Us is to really pave the road for maybe some of the learning. And if we can learn out of previous and historical stats, but what is currently even the norm today, it's all about how are you as an individual, and I'm talking to you, the audience, whether you're a millennial women in leadership that is just grooming yourself into the corporate world, or the public sector, to the Gen Z who are going into university and trying to figure out what you want to do in your career. You really have to believe that you can make that difference and that pivotal change. And so my question is back to you on what would make things change. What could you do to make things change for the better and for more optimistic stats moving forward?
I love that. I'm going to continue on that, Esther. When I hear those stats, Nancy, I hear opportunity for us. I hear that the time is right, and right now, for the audience here today and everybody that's at this virtual table to really start to understand that there is an opening. And don't get me wrong, it's going to be a challenge, but if that's your aspiration, oh boy, the table is starting to be set in your favor. And so happy to share how you can make your way up and really make an impact.
That's great. Like it's an optimistic look rather than what's wrong with the numbers. That's great.
I'm more of a realist.
Okay, so we have optimist, realist. That's great.
And let me round that off. The generation of women behind me, let's say behind us, are a lot more aware of those statistics than we were coming through the ranks. And so Sarah is right that there is opportunity because the kind of details and the willingness of people like Sarah and Esther and many others like us, who maybe didn't understand the statistics or weren't aware of the statistics, that now that we know that, we are using the energy of the Gen X's and helping to pull them through, helping them, sharing with them the knowledge about, understanding how the system works. What's the type of language you need to use in order to get pulled through the organization. I don't think we were very much aware. We were so busy trying to make it up the ladder. And in some cases, I'll say for me, myself, still trying to make it up the ladder, that we weren't aware of the data and using that data as a form of empowerment. Now we know, and between the knowledge and the enthusiasm, we are going to drag ourselves and our potential female leaders coming up the rank along with us as we continue to change the current status quo.
Yeah, and I think with all of you, what you shared is this idea of a responsibility that each of us feels for ourselves, but also for those coming up behind us. But to your point, Esther, it's also, even if you're early in your career, to have that mindset of that responsibility that goes to yourself and others is actually powerful, because as you said, Lisa, when we were just like, we weren't really thinking about it. We're just like, how do I make it work? So that's really powerful. And I feel that this forum is an opportunity to be able to do that. So I'm curious then to find out from all of you, just your experience when it comes to navigating or, kind of positioning yourself for a position. And let's start with where it actually worked. So you had an opportunity in front of you, you positioned yourself for it, or that process of navigating through it, and you actually got the promotion. So Sarah, maybe we'll start with you to share your experience.
Yeah, I have a number of stories, and the one that I'll focus on is when I did ask for it, and I almost demanded it, and it ended up working out for me. But I think what I had in my soul, if you will, was my conviction in that, hold on a second, I am doing the job of that next level, yet I am being taken advantage of because I'm not asking for what I deserve. And so I went in and armed with my background and what I had been doing, and the fact that I was essentially my merits and credentials, and I demanded it. And my boss was like, yeah, yes, you do, and we will ensure that you get that. And to his credit, he followed through on that. I know that that's not always the case. Promotions can come in many different flavors.
Yes.
Within a role, you can take on a role in the next level, and then you're not necessarily asking for promotion. But when you're in a role and you truly feel, and you truly believe, like, listen, I'm going above and beyond here for a sustained period of time, ask for it. And oftentimes, you never know what's going to happen. They may say yes.
There's asking for what you want and knowing that you've actually gotten something that's something to be proud of. And I've had an experience where I've gone for a specific title, position, industry, and been told no. However, what I didn't realize was there was a no, but there was a bunch of other yeses. So there was a band promotion, there was a pay increase. And while it wasn't the industry that I wanted, it was the next biggest set of industries. So from where I started from, there was win, win, and win. And sometimes we get lost in it's not exactly what I wanted, so it wasn't a win. You ask, and then you find a way to get what you need out of that in order to progress along. It doesn't always have to be exact. It doesn't always have to be picture perfect, right? But if you're making gains in inches, you'd be surprised how quickly you get to a mile.
That's very important, Lisa. And the segue I'll use is the one term I learned from the Harvard negotiation program. And that one word or acronym is BATNA. Right? The best alternative to negotiated agreement. Yes. And that's one of the modules that I had with my MBA cohort in our webinar series. And it's really important what you have defined as just as long as you're making a pivot towards that end state, everything is progressional, and it might not all happen in the one step, but it might happen in a series of steps or a couple of steps. Obviously, our mandate and our focus is on minimize the steps as much as possible. To Sarah's point, demand it. There's having proof to demand it is also very important. So having a structure and format. And so I know that two things that I have used is definitely structure and facts that have backed up what I'm demanding. So one of the leaders in my previous past, and I'll name him because it's a positive, is Derek Bigelfeld. And they had looked at the different ways of his management style and why his team was really a lot more moral, intense, and high performant. And a lot of it had to do with how he had structured promotions and looking at the reality of output and results. And so if you could put something on paper that formalizes the ask. So if there's a value statement that you can quantify, not I've been successful and thus I deserve this. However, I have met my yearly and exceeded my target, which you, my upper lines, are aligned to in your scorecard, 3 out of the 3 years. I have also exceeded on expectation on customer satisfaction, and here's the NPS score to prove that. Here are all the things that I have done from a teaming and collaboration perspective. Here are all of the events by date outcomes that we have received. And by gathering the factoids and creating a value statement, he had suggested, if you have aligned your promotional requirements to the facts, how are they to say no? The question back to the leadership is, tell me why not.
Yes.
Sorry, Nancy, I just wanted to be realistic also. With corporations come policy. And to ground what Esther just said in realism, it's not like the next day you're going to get that promotion and you're going to get the money in your bank account. What you're doing is you are forcing or you are empowering your manager to go and ask. That may still take time. That may take 3 months. It may take 6 months. It may take, 6 weeks. But it's still going to take time. So again, level setting expectations here, depending on cycles and promotion cycles and pay raise cycles in the company, just be aware that all you're doing is planting that seed. And that's so key. People may be reluctant because they're like, oh, I know it's not a promotion cycle. Doesn't matter. Plant that seed when you know you're ready. And then when that promotion cycle comes, you'll be on the top of the list.
Progression doesn't always necessarily mean that you will be in that next role, but progression does. I don't think we should downplay progression, because to your point, Sarah, if things take time, you have to recognize that you're seeing progression rather than just feeling, to your point, Lisa, I didn't get that role. That's the thing that I wanted. And recognizing that progression and not getting frustrated by it, that it is not an overnight thing. If it was, then we wouldn't really be having this conversation like this. It would be a moot point. So I think that's a really good point. The thing that was brought up at the beginning, or all of you have in some way talked about, is the idea of asking. And that seems really simple, but even from my own experience, that's not something I see everyone being comfortable doing. I certainly know of experiences where people were waiting. They were like, I'm waiting to be asked, or I feel like I've done my due, like I paid my dues and I should have been asked, or I should have been considered. And yes, I'm not saying I completely disagree with it. Yes, absolutely. Hopefully what you do, it's represented, and people can see that. But the idea of asking versus waiting for, I'm curious, in your experience, have you found that women are more hesitant to ask and represent themselves that way? Yeah.
I would
We
say
know what
yes.
Esther said.
I will say yes, and with no hesitation, only because I, as again, serve a MBA cohort who is just now entering or just about to enter the workforce. They have all told me, even during their internships, they're a little bit nervous, not quite sure when to be bold and hesitant, and wanting to almost default to waiting for you deserve this, and thus and someone approaching them versus and I hate to say it, but our male counterparts tend to be more bold and a lot more proactive. And in my previous 10 years, I've learned to get out of that discomfort zone of being a little bit more latent and being more proactive and being bold and uncomfortable in doing so, but slowly unraveling out of that uncomfort level. It is something that's training, not something that you gain overnight. And so you have to train yourself to be more bold.
Has there been a situation where you feel like you've done the right things, you've asked for the things you think you should have been asking for, demonstrated the results, and done all of that, and have not gotten either the progression or the Lisa, why don't you answer that question?
Requesting with data, to Esther's point, always with data that is beneficial to the corporation first, and then obviously myself. I think women fall into the category of not wanting to be disappointed or turned down. They might also fall into the category of not wanting to fall into the stereotypes of being too aggressive, too ambitious. I think we've heard that a lot in the last couple of weeks. And they might fall into the category of hesitating because of their personal family priorities, right? I mentioned at the beginning of the segment that I am a mother and a wife. And oftentimes women who are parts of families like that often feel that they can't give enough. So they put up the roadblock as to why they can't ask, or they will not ask because they're afraid of the stereotypes that come along with that. Or in my case, they ask and they get told no, so they just stop asking, right? So there's a bunch of different reasons why women don't ask or stop asking, and they fall into probably not just those three categories. Sure, there's lots of other categories that they fall into, fear of not being ready. I think there's a lot of us that, I think there was a statement about when you're ready. If you leave it up to us to define when you're ready, I'll tell you that's one of the things that's different than that I've seen with women and men is, as far as men are concerned, they are always ready. They came out of the womb ready. Okay. But women don't, right? They qualify and requalify themselves before they ask. And when they do ask, there's a whole bunch of other floods of reasons why, things, don't always, they don't always continue to press and pursue what is it that they need for themselves.
Right. Well, I love what you said about that one scenario. You keep asking, you don't either get the answer you think you should be getting, and you stop asking. And that's actually it's a little bit sad, because it's true. That's obviously halted a lot of women from being like, well, I guess there's nothing more. I'm curious, Lisa, have you ever had responses to your asking? And let's say you didn't get it, whatever it was, you didn't get it, and you asked for a reason. I'm curious to find if there's scenarios where you're not satisfied with the reason, and what do you do in the situations where you're not satisfied?
So yes, I have been in situations where I've been given a reason. I think there was one situation where I was told I was asking to go into a role that I was sponsored into. Somebody on this line might sound familiar to them. But the VP said to me that the reason why she did not want me in the role was because I was overqualified, which is highly entertaining. That she, and I'm going to quote her, it sticks in my head. Esther's laughing because she knows. It sticks in my head. She said, I can put a junior person in that role and have a support with a technical person, and they will be successful. What I need is for your skill to go somewhere else. Fast forward, I'll just let you know that that person did end up leaving that position less than 1 year later, but peace. But that was an unsatisfactory answer to me, because I understood that to be in that territory, you had to be the best of the best. Nobody wanted a junior person to support that role, right? So what I did, because I didn't like the answer, I didn't believe in the answer, I didn't criticize, I didn't get into a fight, I went for the best alternative action, right? And I drew blood. I put things on the list that said, these are the 3 things that I want. And they were darn near impossible things. I got every single one of them.
That's awesome.
So you don't have to get the answer that you want, right? You don't have to challenge the answer that you want. That's fine. No problem. What can you get as a result?
I was in a women's only cohort, like education session at a few years ago, and there was this younger than me, maybe by like 5 or 6 years, woman that was so passionate about getting a promotion. And she was telling everybody that would listen in this group of like 30 people, you know, I've asked for a promotion and they didn't give me a promotion, and I don't understand why I haven't got it, and I'm doing the job. And she was so passionate. She was almost like, it was to the point of it was turning everybody off, because there was no real self-reflection. It was more like, oh, the corporation is screwing me, or whatever it was. And I think first of all, I don't think she had good management in that when asking for a promotion, how do you respond? But also, I don't think anybody coached her to be on that, you know, what's my hostage, or what's my progress that I'm going to be okay with. I understand maybe, you know, you've said it already, like you said, peace, maybe not right now, but set me up for success. What do you need to see? And so you may not get it, but how do I progress? And I think that will also make you a little bit more sane, and, you know, not be so on the rejection piece, but you're still getting something out of it as well.
Going in front of your leadership, you want to have 2 or 3 options for that alternative plans. So what will you do to sponsor me or endorse me to these? If they don't have an answer, then have an answer on their behalf, which means you need to have sponsors and network of people endorsing you. So my other theorem for promotional advancement is not only having a negotiated position or 2 or 3 backup plans, but who are going to be your networked sponsors and networked mentors. And those 2 sponsors and mentors are different. That's another episode upcoming. But they are the ones who will be your lifelines to say, yes, that VP, that general manager, that senior vice president, and I have a combination thereof in different line of businesses who have seen me win and execute, seen my capabilities, seen my management and collaboration skills, that they will endorse me to allow me to get those positions.
I have that too, Esther. The only thing that I would say is I differentiate between advocates and sponsors, because I do believe that advocates speak on your behalf when you're not there, and sponsors help to pull you through the organization, right? So I think there's a differentiation between the two. But also, what I hope the audience gets from this is there is never only one person who has your promotion in the palm of their hands. It is usually a board of people that either will influence, participate, or make the decision on your promotion. And that goes for whether you're talking about like a band promotion from like a level 6 to a level 7, or a titled promotion, which usually comes along with a compensation promotion as well. There is usually, especially when you're going higher up, not a single person. So the idea of having sponsors and advocates, and remember the difference between the two, becomes incredibly important, because on those phone calls or in those meetings when they are talking about whether or not Sarah is going to be a good candidate for this promotion or a good candidate for this role, there's a bunch of people with a bunch of opinions. So you do need to make sure that you have a large, diverse advocate and sponsor behind you.
whether you like it or not, who you know matters. And I don't mean that in a try and flatter as many people as you can and make like, weird relation. That's not what I mean, but who you know matters, because everything is done in relationship. There is, unless you are a solopreneur doing your own thing, even then, it's not quite that way. You are so interconnected in the decision making. And I love what you said about who makes your decision on the promotion is not just your leader. So even though sometimes you can get irritated with them, let's put the best lens and say, it's possible they did their best, but they're not the only one involved. And I think that's where the idea of who are the advocates. And yes, sometimes your sponsors, advocate, mentor can all be in under one person. It's possible, but you don't want to rely on just one relationship you have or one project that you did. Like, it is a constant thing of relationship building and connecting with people. And you can do that in a very genuine way without trying to be Esther or trying to be Sarah or trying to be Lisa, because it is important that you do it in a way that is you. I think that's really valuable. That relationship piece, I would say, is probably one of the most critical things when it comes to progression or promotion, whichever way you choose to go.
And the higher up you get in a corporation, the less promotions there are available.
Yes.
And so it's important to recognize that. And like, there's only a finite number of executive positions and a finite number of, executive position minus one. And obviously the lower you are, the more, the more available to you, but it is going to be harder. And sometimes patience is your friend. And you're also in competition with other people that you may not even know that are also asking for a promotion. So it sometimes it seems super personal if you're rejected, but sometimes it's just timing. But that's why you have to let it be known that that's your expectation, because when that timing is right, you'll be the next in line.
I know we've talked about a few different things, like you have brought up like skills and behaviors. So if you had to really pick like one or two that have been the most instrumental for you in this idea of navigating progression or promotion in your careers, what would you ladies say are like the top one or two?
Two things. Number one, be so good they can't ignore you. Make sure your work backs you up. And secondly, ask for it. Because if you don't get it now, you'll get it later.
Say the two I believe are instrumental to negotiating a promotion is networking. Secondly is, again, going back to the principles of negotiation, and I'll take from Harvard what I learned from them in the accelerated management course that I took there, which is 4 principles of negotiation, in that separating the person that you're negotiating with from the actual issue. Secondly, negotiate not a position-focused stance, but an interest-oriented stance. And then thirdly, developing a criteria, like I said, the value statement of what backs up what you have executed and been successful with. And lastly, having the different options to choose from, BATNA, the best alternative options that you can be okay with if you don't get that end state right away.
One that stands out for me that you need to be able to get through multiple iterations of this process. And then there's also a skill. The skill would be continuous learning, right? In every role that you are going to get and or be given within your organization, you've got to be willing to learn, right? Not just the mechanics, the technicalities of how to do the role, but some of those kind of softer things that are required in order to be excellent at it. And so there's that learning element is going to take you far, 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 far in any job that you get, in whatever way you get it. The other thing that I would say, which is more of a character trait, is attitude. Attitude is incredibly important. There's a bunch of things that I think fall under attitude. Perseverance, right? You've got to have that willingness to persevere. You've got to be a little fearless. Sometimes I don't need to eliminate all fear, but your attitude has to be one that it might be scary, but I'm going to try, right? There's an old saying my mother used to say. I'm going to write a book called My Mother Used to Say, and it is, attitude determines altitude, right? It isn't a single factor, but it's a really important factor. It even feeds into your willingness to continuously learn, right? So those two things I think are important on top of many more things and some of the very key things that Sarah and Esther have articulated.
Yeah, those are really great ones. The one thing that really stands out to me that kind of is at the core of all of this is that sense of feeling bold or confident to go for something. And I think what all the ladies have shared here, there's different processes to get there. And recognizing how do I do that, and so having mentors help you with that. Like, so are there people who can help you with building that around yourself, and also taking a look at, so the idea, I think it was Sarah who mentioned the idea of like know what you bring to the table. Sometimes just the action of putting it down somewhere and looking at it again is a powerful way to recognize what you bring to the table. But I feel like that just that belief in self is a ongoing process that you will build along the way. It's not something that just happens, but you have to find ways to build it. And mentors and just kind of taking a step back and looking at what you've already brought to the table is a great way to be able to do that. So ladies, I want to thank you for this conversation and looking forward to having many, many more. Let's wrap up this panel conversation with what we like to call our gotcha questions. These are those sensitive questions that you might not feel comfortable posing to your own leaders. But here at Women Like Us, we want to encourage and create a space for exactly those types of conversations. So listen in as our panelists respond to some of these more sensitive questions.
If you felt that you were passed over for a promotion several times due to some type of discrimination, how would you navigate this?
If you feel as though you are being passed over for a promotion because of your gender or any other forms of discrimination, I would just say that things are not always black and white, as in they're not superficial in nature. It isn't usually boiled down to the color of your skin. That's not to say that there isn't an unconscious bias at play, but oftentimes there's a lot more things at play. So I'll give you an example. Earlier we talked about making sure that you have advocates and sponsors and understanding the difference between the two. I think sometimes when you're passed over for a promotion, it's hard for you to visualize the impact and influencers that are behind the scenes that might not be in your corner, that might not be advocating for you. And sometimes what we do is we latch on to the only visible, quantifiable thing that we can find to justify the decision. So what I would say is the best way to think about this is that there are more than one things at play. You shouldn't forget or discount that there's unconscious bias, but think of it like a chessboard, right? You need to have an understanding of what player are you on the chessboard? Are you a pawn piece, a bishop, a knight? You need to have that understanding. And you need to understand whose chessboard you're playing on, because it's oftentimes when you're climbing the ladder, not your own chessboard. You're playing on somebody else's, for somebody else's agenda. And if you think about it in that terms and ask yourself the question, what role do I play in here? Whose chessboard am I on? What does that person stand to gain from leveraging me as the candidate of choice or somebody else? And what other players are on the board? You'll probably figure out that it's probably not just about discrimination because of your gender. It's probably because there are sponsors and advocates on a chessboard that you just don't know what role you're playing. So focus on figuring that out and closing those gaps, and you probably will see that, as I said, it's not black and white.
What if you were happy in your career and you didn't want to work up the corporate ladder? Is this career suicide as a woman?
I think it's totally okay if you're not interested in climbing the corporate ladder. It's not for everybody. Some people work to live, some people live to work. It's really what makes you happy, what makes you motivated. And so it's totally fine if you're not interested in becoming a VP, CEO, or anything like that. It's your own personal choice. And I also think that if you found something that's made you happy, and you found an experience in a team and a company that you are totally into and you're just so happy to go to work, my gosh, you're already ahead of the game. So it's totally fine. It is not career suicide. The only thing that I'll say is that with corporations, teams change, work changes, your bosses change, and so on. So you may find yourself in a situation whereby you now need to make a change, or a life circumstance or something like that. And so it really is important to gain as many different experiences throughout your career as you possibly can. And that doesn't necessarily mean going up to the corporate ladder. It really just means, try something new, gain new experiences, join a new team, and that can actually be a really fulfilling career. So no need to stress yourself out. If you found something that you really love, do it, enjoy it.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Women Like Us. We would love to hear from you. So please let us know your thoughts, your questions. You can share them all in the comments below. And if you know of other women who would see value in listening in and being a part of a conversation like this, please share. And we look forward to having you join us for another episode of Women Like Us.